for the hardest-hitting show in talk radio. The true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Politico Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. My name is Darren Gibson. I'm your host today. Katy Steele is off this week. She will return next week. Of course, Katy filling in for Jack Prince, and I want to wish Jack a happy hello today. And to Katy as well, and for all of you out there as well. We all need some happiness in our lives. Unfortunately, you're probably not going to get much of that on this show today. I've got to talk about the coronavirus. I got a lot of Trump news to talk to you about. And we do have an off-the-cuff segment this week, so you're going to want to stick around to the end of the show for that. As a reminder, you can listen to us anywhere you'd like at Spreaker.com. Do a search for Southpaws there. You can find us at Apple Podcasts by doing a search for Southpaws. Once you found our logo, you found us. Links to our podcasts are sent all over our social media. You can follow us anytime you like. Facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. Also at Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can find us on Tumblr, southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. And you can find us at youtube.com by doing a search for Southpaws Radio there. You can become a patron of the show anytime you like at patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. And you can listen to the show on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI-FM in Taos, New Mexico, KZGM in Kabul, Missouri, and Global Community Radio Channel 1. We're on every Saturday night at 11 p.m., so make sure you listen to us there as well. Before we get started with today's show, all of us at Southpaws would like to wish Wood TV reporter Barton Dieters a speedy recovery. It was announced on Thursday's 7 p.m. newscast that Barton has been in the hospital for several weeks. He was just diagnosed Thursday with West Nile virus. He is on a ventilator. He has not been doing well, although we do have some good news. He had been suffering from a high fever. The fever has broken. So I'm hoping this is the beginning of the recovery process for Barton. I will tell you that I met Barton in March of this year at the Bernie Sanders rally in downtown Grand Rapids at Calder Plaza. I was covering the rally for Pacifica Radio. Barton happened to be there as a civilian and as a Bernie supporter, and we talked for several minutes, and it was very nice to finally talk to one of the best reporters in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So, Barton, we hope you get well real soon, buddy. We would love to see you back on the air soon. With that, I want to get to this story regarding my alma mater, Grand Valley State University. This story comes from Wood TV out of Allendale Township, Michigan. The Ottawa County Department of Public Health is telling Grand Valley State University students to stay in place for 2 weeks as it attempts to quell a coronavirus outbreak. So starting on Thursday, September 17th, Allendale campus students should stay in their homes on or off campus through October 1st, though they may still go to class, get food, exercise, go to medical appointments, and fulfill religious obligations. They may go to work if deemed essential and if their employer okays their return. Students should not go to any parties or other group activities. Unless there's an emergency, they should not go back to their parents' homes so as to not spread the virus to other areas. So yeah, Grand Valley State University has had a big outbreak, 400 plus students. Actually, it's more than that. They're now saying that since August 23rd, according to the Ottawa County Health Department, they have seen more than 600 cases among the student population in Allendale Township. Grand Valley has the largest outbreak of any college in Michigan. That includes Michigan State University, the University of Michigan, Central Michigan University. According to Grand Valley's online dashboard, as of noon Wednesday, September 16th, they showed 370 active cases of coronavirus, and most of those are among students who live off campus. So Grand Valley having to have the students stay in place, I guess, if you want to call it that, because of the coronavirus. I'm sorry, these colleges and these schools started school too damn early. They never should have been allowed to open. We're still in a pandemic, folks. And I'm sorry. A lot of people aren't taking the precautions that are necessary, especially young people. As a matter of fact, I want to get to this story. This has been spread everywhere. I've got this from The Guardian. This is dated Thursday, September 17th. A rural church wedding and reception on a beautiful day in the shadow of Mount Katahdin was no doubt a happy day, but it has spread misery ever since. That single event on August 7th is linked to coronavirus outbreaks in at least 2 other locations in Maine, with 170 people contracting the coronavirus. 7 of them have died. Nirav Shah, director of the Maine Center for Disease Control, said the single event has the power to undo much of the state's progress during the pandemic. He warned that the virus can become, quote, the uninvited guest at every single wedding, party, or event in Maine, end of quote. The super spreader event started with wedding attendees in the Katahdin region and spread to the community at large and to a nursing home in Madison. So, yeah, these people that died as a result of this weren't even at this wedding to begin with. That's how much this stuff spreads. An attendee worked at the York County Jail 220 miles away, where there are more than 70 cases. The state is also investigating an outbreak at a church in Sanford, Maine, home of the wedding's officiant. None of those who died actually attended the wedding and reception. The first of the deaths was reported in Millinocket, where no one has tested positive for several weeks, according to the town manager. 6 other deaths were residents of Maple Crest Rehabilitation and Living Center in Madison, Maine. The ramifications were swift. Across the state, brides and grooms scrambled as event venues reassessed safety rules during the pandemic. The reception venue lost its business license briefly and hired a public relations firm. The pastor hired a law firm that specializes in religious liberty. Here we go again. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your individual freedoms, free to be dumb, are superseded by public health. Period. End of story. It's been ruled this way for 200 years in this country. Let me continue here. The outbreak changed the calculus of state health officials who urged renewed vigilance in a state that had largely controlled the virus previously. Shah said, quote, it is spreading in the community in and around York County with remarkable force, end of quote. The epicenter was an unlikely place. Millinocket is a rural community that serves as gateway to North Woods, made famous by Henry David Thoreau. Before the wedding, the community had no cases of the coronavirus. Not anymore. It unfolded on a sunny day in August with a wedding at the Tri-Town Baptist Church in East Millinocket and a reception at the Big Moose Inn in Millinocket. Population 4,400. There were 65 guests at the Big Moose Inn, which was a violation of the state's 50-person limit for indoor events. Many attendees did not wear masks or socially distance from each other. Other guests not affiliated with the wedding brought the number to more than 100. The officiant at the wedding, the Reverend Todd Bell of Calvary Baptist Church in Sanford, joined several members of his congregation. About 10 of his congregants have also tested positive for the virus. Bell declined to speak to the Associated Press. He continued to hold services in Sanford and bristled over attacks aimed at him on social media. In one sermon, he urged people to put their trust in God over government and question the wisdom of masks, likening their effectiveness to a chain-link fence trying to keep out mosquitoes. On a video which is no longer public on YouTube, he said he's been reviled because of the wedding. Many people have questioned the wisdom of having such a gathering in the midst of a pandemic. The Reverend Erica Hewitt, a Unitarian Universalist in Bath, Maine, said this, quote, tragic is the word for things that we don't have any control over. In this case, we don't have control over the virus, but this pastor absolutely had the choice whether to perform the wedding, end of quote. Already struggling, Maine's summer wedding industry tightened rules, forcing people to pare down guest lists or cancel events altogether. In Belfast, Thomas Roberts nearly blew a gasket when the boathouse notified his daughter the venue might cancel her wedding. On social media, Roberts said, quote, "We have people already paid for travel arrangements, airline arrangements, rooms, and COVID-19 testing before traveling. Don't mess with my daughter's wedding less than a month before it." End of quote. His daughter Amber said she has already reduced her guest list and informed guests of Maine's quarantine and testing requirements. Her wedding is outdoors, but she may have to drop more people from an indoor reception. Quote, "I worry and stress out very easily. We're trying very hard to follow their guidelines so we can have a happy day." End of quote. No, I tell you what, lady. If you want to stress out, get this virus and see what happens. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to a friend of mine named Jeffrey who has been diagnosed with coronavirus. Was tested a few days ago, just got the results on Thursday. So, Jeffrey, I hope you feel better soon. I know you've said that it's awful. So, folks, you need to start listening to people who have had this virus. Stop listening to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a moron. He's an idiot. He's an imbecile. He's a bully. He's everything. He's Hitler. Yes, we used to have the rule on the show that you cannot compare anybody to Hitler except Hitler himself. That rule has been thrown out the window entirely thanks to Donald Trump. And speaking of which, here's another thing that a lot of Trump's supporters follow, is this QAnon crap. Well, you might have trouble finding it after this week. I have this story. This is William Turton writing for Bloomberg.com. This was dated September 11th. A popular website for posts about the conspiracy group QAnon abruptly shut down after a fact-checking group identified the developer as a New Jersey man. QMap.pub is among the largest websites promoting the QAnon conspiracy, with over 10 million visitors in July, according to web analytics firm SimilarWeb Limited, and served as the primary archive of QAnon's posts. The website aggregates posts by Q, the anonymous figure behind the QAnon theory, and the creator of the QMap.pub website is known online only as QAppAnon. The fact-checking site Logically.ai identified Jason Galinas of New Jersey on September 10th as the developer and mouthpiece for the site. New Jersey state records connect QAppAnon to Galinas' home address, according to Bloomberg. Reached outside his home, Galinas declined to comment on the Logically report, saying only that someone had sent it to him on Twitter after it was published. When asked if he was behind the website QMap, he said, quote, "I'm not going to comment on any of that. I'm not going to get involved. I want to stay out of it." End of quote. Wearing an American flag baseball cap, Galinas said the QAnon is a, quote, "patriotic movement to save the country." End of quote. Really? They're going to save the country. Donald Trump and all these QAnon folks are going to save the country. I got news for you. They're going to destroy the country, what's left of it. You better listen, folks. You better listen real good to what I have to say today. I'm going to be controversial, and I don't care. You just better listen. Hours after the initial contact from Bloomberg News, the website was no longer accessible. A LinkedIn profile for Galinas says he works as an information security analyst at Citigroup. Citigroup declined to comment. Citigroup, of course, is the owner of Citibank. The QAnon theory posits that Donald Trump is battling a deep state ring of child sex traffickers. Really? No, he's a client of theirs, my opinion. It has already motivated some domestic extremists to violent acts or to threaten violence. That is according to the FBI. As some in Trump's inner circle have shown signs of support for the conspiracy or its followers, questions have swirled about the identities of those responsible for promoting it. In August, Trump said that QAnon followers are, quote, people who love our country, end of quote. Trump's director of social media, Dan Scavino, as well as Eric Trump, have posted QAnon imagery. QAppanon, the online name of QMap's creator, also runs a Patreon account, which receives more than $3,000 a month in donations. That is, according to Patreon. And I wish I was getting $3,000 a month through Patreon, folks. Patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. In March, QAppanon announced on Patreon an upcoming Android app named Armor of God, a social network for followers of QAnon. Wow. In Armor of God's Google Play Store profile, the service describes itself as a platform, quote, designed for patriots worldwide to create and share content including prayers, news, memes, and posts, end of quote. The developer's email address listed on the Google Play page is support@patriotplatforms.com. According to New Jersey State Business Records, Patriot Platform LLC's address matches Jelinas' home address. After a Bloomberg News investigation, the Armor of God app was no longer accessible on the Google Play Store. According to its website, Patriot Platforms, quote, is a technology company building next-generation social media applications and tools, end of quote. The description is similar to the business purpose stated on the New Jersey Business Record linked to Jelinas' home address. Quote, create next-generation news and social media platforms, end of quote. As of Friday of last week, the Patriot Platforms website was also offline. You know, folks, I'm just going to tell you, they're nuts. They're crazy. They're insane. It's insanity. I can tell you what insanity is. As somebody who has mental illness, I can tell you these folks are certifiable. I mean, this is crazy. Here's what it sounds like in the back room of that website. Yes, they're all cuckoo. Every single last one of them. There really is no other word for it except certifiable. They really are, folks. As I said, I'm going to be controversial today. You better take a good listen to this. And I want to go on to the next story. This is Timothy Johnson writing for MediaMatters.org. This is dated also September 11th. Roger Stone is making baseless accusations of widespread voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election and is urging Donald Trump to consider several draconian measures to stay in power, including having federal authorities seize ballots in Nevada, having FBI agents and Republican state officials physically block voting under the pretext of preventing voter fraud, using martial law or the Insurrection Act to carry out widespread arrests, and nationalizing state police forces. Folks, this should scare the living shit out of you. And if it doesn't, what is wrong with you? Let me continue here. Stone, a longtime confidant of Trump, made the comments during a September 10th appearance on far-right conspiracy theorist Alex Jones's InfoWars network. On July 10th, Trump commuted a 40-month prison sentence that was handed down to Stone after he was convicted of lying to Congress and tampering with witnesses as part of special counsel Robert Mueller's probe into 2016 election interference. Namely, Stone lied to Congress about his contacts with WikiLeaks, which released hacked emails with the aim of boosting Trump's prospects. In the weeks leading up to the commutation, Stone made a number of media appearances where he asked Trump to grant him clemency and said that in exchange he could be a more effective campaigner for Trump's 2020 re-election efforts. And I'm going to stop real quickly here. And they said that WikiLeaks released hacked emails with the aim of boosting Trump's prospects. I don't think so. Because WikiLeaks, in its entire history, has never had to retract one single story, period. No other news organization can lay that claim. And yes, they are a news organization. Sorry, they've won journalism awards around the world. Let me continue. Again, this is MediaMatters.org. Stone's efforts are now underway, and his aim appears to be to spread conspiracy theories about voter fraud and call for actions that would likely intimidate potential Joe Biden voters. During his September 10th appearance on The Alex Jones Show, Stone declared that the only legitimate outcome to the 2020 election would be a Trump victory. He made this assertion on the basis of his entirely unfounded claim that early voting has been marred by widespread voter fraud. Stone argued that, quote, the ballots in Nevada on election night should be seized by federal marshals and taken from the state, end of quote, because, quote, they are completely corrupted, end of quote, and falsely said that, quote, we can prove voter fraud in the absentees right now, end of quote. He specifically called for Trump to have absentee ballots seized in Clark County, Nevada, an area that leans Democratic. Stone went on to claim that, quote, the votes from Nevada should not be counted. They are already flooded with illegals, end of quote, and basically suggested that former Senator Harry Reid, Democrat Nevada, should be arrested and that Trump should consider nationalizing Nevada's state police force. Oh, the ballots are already been tampered with. If you believe any of this tripe, you need to go commit yourself right now. Please do so, and don't vote. Beyond Nevada, Stone recommended that Trump consider several actions to retain his power. Stone recommended that Trump appoint former Representative Bob Barr, Republican of Georgia, as a special counsel, quote, with the specific task of forming an election day operation using the FBI, federal marshals, and Republican state officials across the country to be prepared to file legal objections and, if necessary, to physically stand in the way of criminal activity, end of quote. Stone also urged Trump to consider declaring martial law or invoking the Insurrection Act and then using his powers to arrest Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, Apple CEO Tim Cook, the Clintons, and, quote, anybody else who can be proven to be involved in illegal activity, end of quote. Stone is no stranger to interfering in elections. He was reportedly an organizer of the so-called Brooks Brothers riot during the 2000 presidential election that led to vote counting being suspended in Miami-Dade County, Florida, which left us with George W. Bush. Folks, this should scare the hell out of you. If you're not scared, you're not alive. You are dead. You are brain dead. Folks, this is fascism. It is here. It ain't coming. It's here already. You better keep your eyes peeled and you better get involved. I tell you what, there's a lot of people that refuse to get involved, and I want to play this quick little clip here. This is from The Lone Ranger, and I play this because, one, I heard it this morning, and two, on September 15th, The Lone Ranger celebrated the 71st anniversary of its airing on ABC back in 1949. Folks, I want to play this clip. This is The Lone Ranger talking about people who won't stand up to evil because it doesn't personally affect them.
If it wasn't so serious, I'd feel sorry for the fellow.
Why, Kemosabe? Him bad, Sheriff.
He's no worse than a lot of people who won't stand up against an evil because they think it doesn't affect them personally.
And them like man who won't fight prairie fire because it's far away.
Exactly, Tonto. Crime anywhere threatens all of us.
Absolutely. Did you hear that? Crime anywhere threatens all of us. And that includes the crimes that are being committed out of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. Folks, you better wake up. The coffee's on. You better smell the brew, because it's here, folks. Fascism is here. And if you don't stop it now, you're going to be way too late in trying to contain it. As a matter of fact, I want to get on to the next story here. This is Grace Panetta writing for Business Insider. This is how little Trump thinks of you, folks. I want to read this story. I can't believe this. The White House scrapped a plan by the US Postal Service to send every American household a face mask in April. That is according to the Washington Post, citing documents obtained through public records request. The Post obtained thousands of internal Postal Service documents that revealed previously unreported details of the agency's struggle to deal with the Trump administration's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The documents showed that in early April, after public health experts began recommending face masks to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, some officials at the Department of Health and Human Services suggested that the Postal Service, an agency that delivers mail to the entire country, could be uniquely positioned to deliver packs of reusable masks to every American household. A draft press release obtained by the Washington Post showed that the US Postal Service was preparing to send out 650 million masks, first targeting areas like Louisiana, Michigan, and New York, which at the time were experiencing particularly severe outbreaks of COVID-19. But the White House immediately put the kibosh on the idea when it caught wind of the plan. That, again, is according to multiple Trump administration officials in interviews with the Washington Post. One official said this, quote, "There was concern from some in the White House Domestic Policy Council and the Office of the Vice President that households receiving masks might create concern or panic." End of quote. Once again, Trump wanted to downplay the virus. He still wants to downplay the virus. He said so. And yet you've got these Republicards that won't believe it even if they watch the video. Oh, it's doctored. Oh, the audio's doctored. No, it ain't. I'm sorry. I've been doing video and audio production for 30 plus years. You can tell when stuff has been altered. Sorry, you can. Let me continue from Business Insider. As of Thursday, over 6.6 million Americans had tested positive for COVID-19. Over 196,000 people have died. That is according to the New York Times. So yeah, we're on our way to 200,000 deaths in this country. Steamrolling toward it. In recent days, Donald Trump has come under renewed scrutiny for his handling of the pandemic after veteran journalist Bob Woodward released his latest book, Rage, which extensively documented Trump's response to the pandemic as it was unfolding. Woodward conducted 18 on-the-record interviews with Trump. In a tape from early February released by Woodward, Trump indicated he knew that the virus was airborne and could be more deadly than the seasonal flu, despite underplaying the risk in public. And in a subsequent tape from March, Trump acknowledged to Woodward that he deliberately downplayed the virus to avoid alarming the nation, even as significant community transmission was already occurring. In a tape from March 19th, Trump told Woodward after he moved to restrict travel from Europe and declared a national emergency, quote, "I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down because I don't want to create a panic." End of quote. No, instead what he's created is over 196,000 dead Americans. That's all on Trump. All of it. All of it. Let me be clear. All of it is on Donald John Trump. Period. End of story. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get to the next story here. Again, more about the coronavirus and Trump's efforts to lie to the American people. This is Mary Poppenfuss writing for the Huffington Post. This is dated September 13th. It was updated on Thursday. The Health and Human Services official who has been pressuring the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to change COVID-19 reports to reflect well on Donald Trump has troubling Kremlin ties stretching for years. Politico was the first to report last week that Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary Michael Caputo has been orchestrating a pressure campaign on the CDC to alter agency reports and even stop them to fit Trump's far more optimistic view of COVID-19. Trump himself admitted that he lied when he presented a sunnier view of the pandemic. Caputo, a former top official of the Trump campaign who has no medical or scientific background, has claimed his actions are a defense against the imagined, quote, deep state, end of quote, out to get Trump. Here we go again with that deep state. The deep state is coming to go after Donald Trump. Really? I'm going to be playing them back to back the rest of the day today. But reports of his CDC scheme have renewed fears about his history with Russia, which interfered in the 2016 election to help Trump. And by the way, that's now official from bipartisan congressional reports. So here we go. Caputo, who lived in Russia for 6 years, was an advisor to Boris Yeltsin from 1995 to 1999 and helped him get elected as Russian president. He also served as an advisor to a subsidiary of the state-owned energy company Gazprom and reportedly helped shore up Russian President Vladimir Putin's reputation. Caputo's Kremlin ties were so concerning that he became the target of former special counsel Robert Mueller's probe into Russian interference in the 2016 election. He was questioned but not charged with any offenses. He also testified before the House Intelligence Committee that he had no contact with Russians while serving on the Trump campaign. Caputo has attempted to scrub his links to Russia in his Wikipedia bio and insisted in an interview that his work does not make him a Putin stooge. He told his hometown newspaper, the Buffalo News, that, quote, at the time, Putin wasn't such a bad guy, end of quote. Listen to this stuff. It's not just Trump that's sucking up to these tin pot dictators like Putin, like Kim Jong-un, like Xi Jinping over in China. It's not Biden kissing ass, it's Trump. You better pay attention, folks. Before he was appointed to his current role, Caputo also scrubbed nearly his entire Twitter history, which was riddled with graphic, offensive attacks, outlandish conspiracy theories, and racist comments about the Chinese. Caputo has slammed what he calls Trump's phony impeachment and has spread baseless accusations concerning activities in Ukraine by Joe and Hunter Biden. A key source of that Ukrainian smear, Andriy Derkach, turned out to be a Russian spy attempting to interfere in the current U.S. election. That is according to the Treasury Department, who just revealed this last week. Is Trump's own Treasury Department outing his ass? Caputo has claimed it was Ukraine, not Russia, that interfered in the 2016 election. Oh, Jesus Christ. I hope you folks aren't buying any of this bull crap. No, I'll just say it. It's bullshit, folks. Total 100% USDA grade A. Unbelievable. Let me continue here. Caputo is also a longtime associate of political strategist Roger Stone, who was found guilty of 7 felonies last year, including lying to Congress and tampering with witnesses in the investigation into Russian election interference. So he's not only a longtime associate of Trump, he's also an associate to the guy that wants Trump to federalize state police troopers to come after you, the American citizen. He was an aide to former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort, who is also a convicted felon. Caputo admitted to Politico he has attempted to change CDC reports. He told the Buffalo News that amid the good work the CDC does are, quote, sometimes stories which seem to purposefully mislead and undermine Trump's COVID response, what other scientists label as poor scholarship, end of quote. But Caputo's efforts to manipulate scientific information have been roundly slammed. Dr. Tom Inglesby, director of the Center for Health Security at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health, called it, quote, a new low for science in the U.S., end of quote. Greg Gonzalez, assistant professor of epidemiology at the Yale University Medical School, characterized it as, quote, thuggery suitable for some tin pot dictator, end of quote. Well, when you've got Trump who is kissing up to these tin pot dictators, what do you expect? What the f*** do you expect with this? Seriously, folks, time to wake up. The alarm's ringing. The coffee's on. You can smell it. It's brewing. You better get the coffee. You better shut it off. You better turn the alarm off. You better get out there. You better do something about this. I'll tell you what some people are doing about this. I've got this story. I about fell over when I saw this morning. This is Louis Chilton writing for The Independent out of the UK. This is dated Thursday, September 10th. Actress Susan Sarandon has said she will vote for Joe Biden in the forthcoming U.S. presidential election, despite being a vocal critic of the Democratic candidate. The Thelma and Louise star described the vote as, quote, a vote against fascism, while insisting she will continue to push for a third party in the years to come. And that's actually where I'm at with this right now. I'm voting for Biden. I don't care what anybody else does. I'm voting for Biden. because I've got a lot to lose, and so do a lot of people I care about. And if Trump gets back in, kiss your ass goodbye. Period. Sarandon was met with some criticism on social media after tweeting in support of activist and podcaster Ryan Knight, who had declared he was unwilling to vote for Biden, whom he described as a corporatist. In one of a string of tweets, he wrote, quote, "We live in a dying world that is being consumed by corporate greed, and I won't support evil in any form, not even a lesser one," end of quote. Which was my position, but Trump has become so much of a fascist that I've changed my mind. Continuing the story from The Independent, he also described his disappointment and regret in voting for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. Sarandon then posted her support for Knight, saying that she was standing by him and that she respects, quote, his courage in sharing his journey over the past few years, end of quote. When some people interpreted this as a suggestion that Sarandon was advocating not voting for the Democratic Party, as she had done in 2016, she clarified her position. Quote, "The energy used to shame people should be put into phone banking and whatever else will build enthusiasm for Biden's presidency. I will be voting for Biden as a vote against fascism," end of quote. Sarandon continued, quote, "I then will do everything in my power to help create a People's Party free from corporate and Wall Street influence so that next time it's not a choice between the lesser of two evils," end of quote. The actress had been a vocal supporter of socialist Bernie Sanders, a Democratic socialist, not a socialist, try again, who lost the Democratic Party. No. The DNC Bernie Sanders. Let's just get it right out there and just tell the truth. Let's not sugarcoat anything. I'm not into sugarcoating. Apparently The Independent is. I'm just going to stop there because it's going to piss me off. But yeah, I get where Susan Sarandon's coming from, and that's just exactly what I'm doing because I can't take any more of this fascism. You know, Trump is doing this and this and this and this and this. Let me give you a couple of examples of Trump's fascism. This is Dina Temple-Raston writing for National Public Radio. This is dated September 16th. A spokesperson for Joint Forces Headquarters Command in Washington, D.C., confirmed to National Public Radio that hours before federal police officers cleared a crowded park near the White House with smoke and tear gas on June 1st, a military police staff officer asked if the D.C. National Guard had a kind of heat ray weapon that might be deployed against demonstrators in the nation's capital. Let me be crystal clear about this and repeat this again. Écoutez et répétez. Listen and repeat. On June 1st, when Trump had the park cleared out near the White House using smoke and tear gas, a military police staff officer asked the National Guard in Washington, D.C., if they had a heat ray weapon to use against U.S. citizens, Americans, exercising their First Amendment rights to free speech, freedom to assemble, and freedom to petition the government for redress of grievances. Folks, this is totalitarianism, fascism. There's no other way to put it. Let me continue here. Colonel Robert Phillips, a spokesperson for the Joint Force Headquarters National Capital Region, said the inquiry was made, quote, as a matter of due diligence and prudent military planning, end of quote. Why is the military planning on doing anything against U.S. citizens? They're supposed to be here to protect us from outside forces, not to become Trump's enabler, not to become brown shirts or the SS. The command, quote, inquired informally about capabilities across the full spectrum of non-lethal systems to include the long-range acoustic device and active denial systems, end of quote. Of course, the long-range acoustic device is also known as LRAD and active denial system ADS. That's what Phillips told NPR in a written statement. He further goes on to say, quote, JFHQ NCR does not possess these systems, did not request such systems, and no further action was taken as a result of the officer's email query, end of quote. This statement comes hours after National Public Radio obtained and published written responses to the House Committee on Natural Resources from major Adam DeMarco of the D.C. National Guard, who revealed he had been copied on an email from the Provost Marshal of Joint Force Headquarters. The email said the top military police officer in D.C. was looking for two things: a long-range acoustic device, a kind of sound cannon known as an LRAD, and a device called the Active Denial System, or ADS. The military developed the ADS some 20 years ago as a way to disperse crowds. There have been questions about whether it worked or should be deployed in the first place. It uses millimeter wave technology essentially to heat the skin of people targeted by its invisible ray. So it's basically a ray gun. In his written response to Marco, who has sought whistleblower protection, quoted from an email he said was forwarded to him that originated from the Provost Marshal that read, quote, "The ADS can provide our troops a capability they currently do not have, the ability to reach out and engage potential adversaries at distances well beyond small arms range and in a safe, effective, and non-lethal manner." End of quote. Yeah, non-lethal. Has this been tested to be proved non-lethal? I'm sure they said the same thing about Agent Orange back during Vietnam. And what have they found out? Agent Orange causes cancer, it causes birth defects, it causes all sorts of health issues. So when the government says, oh, this ADS device is safe and non-lethal, I don't believe them. Sorry. Continuing the story, again, this is National Public Radio. The email went on to say that the ADS can direct a beam toward a group and that, quote, provides a sensation of intense heat on the surface of the skin. The effect is overwhelming, causing an immediate repel response by the targeted individual. End of quote. Last month, the New York Times reported that U.S. border officials weighed deploying the so-called heat ray against migrants a few weeks before the 2018 elections. The New York Times reported that Kirstjen Nielsen, then Secretary of Homeland Security, told an aide after the meeting, quote, that she would not authorize the use of such a device and that it should never be brought up again in her presence. End of quote. Yet according to DeMarco, it was something considered by the Defense Department's lead military police officer the morning of June 1st after days of fiery protests and looting in Washington, D.C. DeMarco said in his written comments that he responded about a half hour later that, quote, the D.C. National Guard was not in possession of either an LRAD or an ADS, end of quote. The second piece of equipment DeMarco said they asked for was a kind of sound cannon called an LRAD. NPR reported last week that by not using one, authorities may have violated court-ordered regulations that spell out how demonstrators in the nation's capital are to be warned before aggressive tactics are used against them. Attorneys who helped write the agreed-upon rules as part of a 2015 settlement agreement said federal police are required to warn large crowds multiple times they need to disperse, and they must do so loudly enough that the orders can be heard for blocks. That's how an LRAD would be used in this case. The LRAD emits a piercing noise and then can broadcast a voice or a recording at a deafening level. The idea is to allow people at the back of a crowd to hear instructions. That notice did not appear to happen on June 1st. Protesters who were there said police advanced through the crowd with little warning, firing tear gas and smoke canisters shortly before Donald Trump appeared outside for a photograph in front of St. John's Episcopal Church. Mara Verheiden-Hilliard, who helped write the settlement agreement, said, quote, they have an obligation to notify that group that they are in violation of the law and to give them the opportunity to comply with a lawful order, end of quote. In a class action lawsuit, she represented demonstrators, tourists, and passers-by who were arrested during a 2002 demonstration against the International Monetary Fund and World Bank in Washington. Gregory Monahan, acting chief of the U.S. Park Police, told lawmakers in July that his officers had abided by the rules in that agreement. During sworn testimony before the House Committee on Natural Resources in July, he said, quote, the protocol was followed. There were 3 warnings given, and they were given utilizing a long-range acoustic device. It's called an LRAD. That's what it stands for. That was the device used. End of quote. DeMarco said in his written answers to the committee that the National Guard was not in possession of an LRAD that day. Verheiden-Hilliard said, quote, there is zero evidence that there were any officers who can testify that they were in the farthest reaches of the crowd. There has to be documentation that the notice was given multiple times, and there are supposed to be recordings made that the notice was given. We wrote all these in specifically for this reason. In fact, unfortunately, it would appear in anticipation of what happened in Lafayette Park." End of quote. A U.S. Park Police spokesman told NPR that Monahan, quote, "stands by his testimony to the committee." End of quote. The official said because of ongoing litigation, the U.S. Park Police could not comment further. Wow. Just think about this, folks. The government using the military on you, using heat rays on you, using deafening sound devices against you. Is this really the country you want to live in? You need to think about that. And then I have another story from NPR. This is Alana Wise writing for them on September 17th. In austere, starkly divisive remarks, Donald Trump Thursday said he would create a commission to promote patriotic education and announced the creation of a grant to develop a pro-American curriculum. You know what this sounds like, folks? Propaganda. The move is largely political, a reaction to a growing push by some academics for schools to teach an American history that better acknowledges slavery and systemic racism. Yeah, Trump doesn't want you to know that this country was built on racism and violence, which it was. Go take a look in history. In the speech, Trump decried what he said was a, quote, "twisted web of lies," end of quote, being taught in U.S. classrooms about systemic racism in America, calling it, quote, "a form of child abuse," end of quote. No, not teaching the children what really happened is a form of child abuse. He reprised themes from a speech he gave in July at Mount Rushmore. Quote, "Teaching this horrible doctrine to our children is a form of child abuse, the truest sense. For many years now, the radicals have mistaken American silence for weakness. They're wrong. There is no more powerful force than a parent's love for their children, and patriotic moms and dads are going to demand that their children are no longer fed hateful lies about this country." End of quote. Wow. Teaching this horrible doctrine is a form of child abuse. Yep. The federal government does not have jurisdiction over school curriculum, thank God. Trump decried a radical movement working against telling a more flattering version of U.S. history as Democrats' efforts to smear the country for political gain. No, they're just trying to tell the truth. I'm sure they're going for political gain too, but that's just politics. Trump's remarks reflect a growing outcry among Republicans against recent moves to tell a more even-handed version of the nation's history, including its early foundational reliance on slave labor and the long-time disenfranchisement of and systemic racism against racial minorities. In particular, Republicans, I'll just call them Republicans, retardlicans, whatever, have taken offense to the New York Times Pulitzer Prize-winning 1619 Project, which detailed the country's history from when the first enslaved Africans were brought to America's shores. Trump said Thursday, quote, "Critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and the crusade against American history is toxic propaganda, ideological poison that, if not removed, will dissolve the civic bonds that tie us together. It will destroy our country." End of quote. No, you've already done that, you orange pig. Unbelievable. Trump said schools need to focus instead on the legacy of 1776. When American colonies declared independence from Great Britain, the newly formed committee, Trump said, will be called the 1776 Commission, a further dig at the New York Times Project. Of course, Trump probably called them fake news as well. Trump did say this, quote, "American parents are not going to accept indoctrination in our schools, cancel culture at work, or the repression of traditional faith, culture, and values in the public square." End of quote. I gotta tell you this. The public square is not for traditional faith when it comes to the government. Separation of church and state, folks. Trump blamed the left, aided by the media and unnamed corporations. I'm sure he was thinking Mark Zuckerberg and Tim Cook, for, quote, a vicious and violent assault on law enforcement, end of quote, and said violent protests in recent months, quote, are the direct result of decades of left-wing indoctrination in our schools, end of quote. No, the violent protests across this country, Donald, are a direct result of your stoking up hatred. You're a violent person, you orange pig. You're violent. His supporters are violent. The Republicans are violent. Period. Folks, again, time to wake up. Time to smell the brew. Let me continue here. In a shot at his Democratic challenger, former Vice President Joe Biden, Trump said he would add a statue of Caesar Rodney to the National Garden of American Heroes Park, a proposal he made in his Mount Rushmore speech. A statue of Rodney, a slave owner who signed the Declaration of Independence, was removed from Wilmington, Delaware this month amid protests against police brutality and systemic racism. Trump criticized Biden for not speaking out about it. Statues paying homage to the Confederacy and other slave owners and racists have been among the most divisive issues in Trump's ongoing culture war against Democrats. Following his remark, the phrases Trump youth and Hitler youth trended on Twitter, with some likening Trump's new education project to the indoctrination of young people in Nazi Germany. No, it isn't likening. It's the exact same goddamn thing, period. You better wake up. You better tell your Republican friends to wake up, because the second incarnation of Hitler is here, and he's got orange skin, and his name is Donald Trump. Yeah, like I said, I'm going to be controversial today. I just don't care. I don't care who gets offended. I don't care how many stations kick me off, how many listeners I lose. I don't care. I'm going to go back to something locally here because the Republicans are at it again. This is Mansour Shaheen writing for Bridge Magazine. This is dated September 17th. Republican Peter Meyer is firing first and going negative in his campaign against Hillary Scholten for the 3rd Congressional District in Michigan, claiming she's backed by extremist and riot sympathizers. Extremist, riot sympathizers, and the Hollywood elite. No, I got news for you folks. Hillary Scholten is a corporatist. But Peter Meyer is also a corporatist. Yeah, the apple fell far from the tree with Peter Meyer, my opinion. The 30-second ad called On Our Side contrasts black and white images of Scholten, a Democrat and civil rights attorney, with inspirational video of Meyer, a U.S. Army veteran whose family founded the Meyer retail chain. Folks, here's the ad in question. Take a listen to this.
You are the company you keep. So who's on Democrat Hillary Scholten's side? Scholten worked with activists who aided violent rioters and is funded by Hollywood liberals trying to defund the police. Hillary Scholten is backed by extremists. Peter Meyer served with heroes. Meyer fought in Iraq, responded with fellow veterans to disasters around the world, stepped up during the pandemic, and cleaned up after the riots. On our side, Peter Meyer for Congress.
I'm Peter Meyer, and I approve this message.
So, again, this is for Michigan's 3rd Congressional District. This is Justin Amash's seat, who has decided not to seek re-election after he left the Republican Party. According to Bridge Magazine, here are the facts. The ad includes no details about the backers of Scholten. When asked by Bridge Magazine for clarification, a spokesperson for the Meyer campaign said the, quote, activist who aided violent rioters, end of quote, refers to the American Civil Liberties Union. The, quote, Hollywood liberals, end of quote, are actress and activist Alyssa Milano, and the extremists are NARAL, Pro-Choice America, Planned Parenthood, and Emily's List. So here are her connections. Scholten worked as an attorney with the Michigan Immigration Rights Center, which partnered with the ACLU in 2018 to petition Kent County to end its jail contract with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, something we've talked about on this show over the last couple of years. In June, the ACLU urged law enforcement in Grand Rapids, Detroit, Lansing, and Kalamazoo, quote, not to pursue prosecutions or dismiss charges against people protesting against police brutality during the last 2 weeks, end of quote. Milano, a TV star and activist for the hashtag #MeToo movement, participated in a virtual fundraiser for Skolton in May and donated $500 to her campaign in September 2019 per Open Secrets, which you can also find on the Federal Election Commission website, fec.gov. You really need to go and dig around in there. You'll be shocked at some of the contributions. On Twitter, Milano has advocated defunding police, asked, quote, "How many hungry children would the cost of this tank feed?" End of quote. And accused police in Portland, Oregon of, quote, "terrorizing the community," end of quote. Per her website, Skolton has been endorsed by the National Abortion Rights Action League, Emily's List, and Planned Parenthood. While they are all based on some truth, the arguments together add up to a conclusion that is shaky at best. The ACLU is a 100-year-old legal defense group that describes itself as nonpartisan, and while the group has its share of critics and has objected to some criminal charges filed against protesters, there is no evidence it has directly aided violent rioters. Milano, whom Skolton referred to as her, quote, "childhood TV idol and phenomenal," end of quote, women's rights activist, is singular Hollywood liberal, not the multiple ones as the ad states. The three groups that have endorsed Skolton are united in their advocacy for abortion access. No doubt that is divisive, but extreme? A Gallup poll this May indicates 79% of Americans believe abortion should be legal in at least some circumstances. 48% of Americans identify as pro-choice. Skolton campaign manager Wellesley Daniels told Bridge Magazine, quote, "It's disappointing that Peter Meyer decided to go negative right out of the gate with scare tactics and Washington Republican talking points," end of quote. Asked for comment, Meyer spokesperson Noah Sadler repeated the claims about Milano and called her an extremist. Quote, "Ms. Skolton, who herself has labeled my boss a far-right extremist, is not the target of our ad, but the questionable company she keeps," end of quote. The ad uses provocative and vague language to demonize Skolton, which is a disservice to voters because the facts speak for themselves. Skolton is a progressive, actually no she isn't, she's a corporatist, who spent her career fighting for traditionally liberal causes such as housing equity and LGBTQ and immigration rights. Meyer is a conservative, let me say staunch conservative, describing himself on his campaign website as 100% pro-life, actually pro-fetus, because they're not pro-life. They don't believe in helping people after they're born. He favors a strong military and reduced regulations. Yeah, because Meyer'd like to sell you garbage and get away with it. My opinion. It's nuts. This is how it is, folks, in 2020. 2020 has already gone off the deep end here, and I want to finish up with off the cuff. I've got Lee Brown. This is for the New York Post on September 17th. Police in Maine are hunting a middle-aged woman who has been dumping dog poop in Trump supporters' mailboxes, according to a report on Thursday. A patrol officer with the Hampton Public Safety told WGME television, quote, "She has been picking up dog feces and putting it in mailboxes specifically of people who have Trump signs outside," end of quote. While I'm personally amused that Trump supporters are getting dog poop in their mailbox, the culprit behind this is probably not going to laugh if they're caught. We reached out to the US Postal Service to, 1, find out if this is a crime, which it is, 2, what the penalties are, and 3, how often this happens. If caught, she could face penalties of up to 3 years in prison and up to $250,000 in fines. And by the way, the inspection service did not have any type of statistics on the frequency of similar incidents. And with that, that's going to wrap things up for this week. We'll be back next week. I'm Darren Gibson. For Katy, Steele, Jack Prince, and Kristen Cook, please support independent media and the First Amendment.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.